Whatever happened to the principles of the 2010 Republican-controlled House of Representatives? You know, the one that vowed to block, kill, and slow down every single piece of Barack Obama's presidential agenda? Why is today's Republican Party abandoning its ideals and fighting to give Obama even more power? Let's rumble. Joining me for tonight's Big Picture Rumble are Brian Pruitt, director of RedState.com, T.J. Helmstetter, director of media relations for the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, and Horace Cooper, attorney and senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. Welcome, guys.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. So why is the Republican Party abandoning this principle of if it's Obama's, we don't like it? I don't get it.
I think the Republican Party's showing leadership. They helped President Clinton get NAFTA passed back in the 90s.
The objection of Democrats. He only got 30 Democratic votes.
And I think it's very interesting how, you know, we hear that a day is a lifetime in politics. Last week, I was talking about how Nancy Pelosi controlled the president's legacy. Now it looks like Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader McConnell control his legacy. It's an interesting turn of events.
But why? TJ?
This is just a case of the president being on the wrong side of his own party. I mean, this is really a battle between the corporate part of the Democratic Party, which needs to be exercised, versus the progressive part of the Democratic Party, the Elizabeth Warren wing of the party.
Exercise with an O, not an E.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would say is, good. The only thing I would say is the narrative was always oversimplified. It was never the Republican posture that if President Obama is for it, we must be against it. If Hitler likes milk, we're not going to come out against milk. It turns out trade promotion authority is a positive good in and of itself, and we're happy to see the President of the United States embrace that concept.
So you are in favor of our abandoning Article 3 of the Constitution?
Actually, this is completely and totally within the auspices of the authority of the House of Representatives and the Senate to decide how the actual implementation language is going to operate.
Article 3 is the judiciary.
No.
And Article 3, starts out saying that, all trials shall be...
This isn't about a trial. This is about setting up what the particular tariff
dispute resolution groups are not American courts. They are corporate courts. We were just told we can't have country of origin labeling on meat by the WTO. And it wasn't an American court. It was a corporate court. It was the WTO.
And it is treated as if it were a tribunal for arbitration purposes. And that's the same way any of these others are. But the truth of the matter is all of the various products that are covered by existing tariffs, those have to be changed by law, not by executive action. They have to be changed by law. And we're going to have a up or down vote on whether that's going to happen.
The importance is that Horace is right. The legislative branch retains its power to say yes or no to this Trans-Pacific Partnership. They absolutely retain their power in our system of government, and it's important.
They are giving away. They are saying we will not allow ourselves to filibuster this. We will not allow ourselves to amend this. The debate will be limited to 83 seconds per member. That's not retaining the power.
What you mentioned the interstate dispute settlement clauses. That's the clause in this trade bill that we know about that's egregious that Elizabeth Warren has been calling attention to.
Violates Article 3 of the Constitution.
Exactly.
Fine.
We have no idea all the other garbage that's in this bill because, frankly, members of Congress are only allowed into a locked room to flip through it without taking any notes or bringing any staff in. Yeah. So who knows what else is in here. Fast track needs to stop because we need to slow down the process of passing this bill.
Is this not just ultimately the final corporate takeover
the Supreme Court has consistently held
democracy?
The Supreme Court has consistently held that any other non-Article 3 court's decision or judgment is not final unless an Article 3 judge issues it. What we're doing with this process is simply setting up an arbitration council, and we do that in a whole number of other contexts.
An arbitration council that can overturn American law.
No, absolutely
not. Congress had to go back last week and pass a law doing away with our country of origin labeling for meat because the WTO said, sorry, you can't have that.
When it comes to trade, the Republican Party is being consistent. The Republican Party saved President Clinton. The Republican Party saved President Clinton back in the 90s, and it looks like if something gets passed, the Republican Party is going to save another Democratic president.
Progressives are being consistent, too. The problem is that we have corporate Democrats against progressive Democrats. And progressive Democrats understand that TPP is bad for workers, it's bad for consumers, and it's bad for our democracy because of these interstate dispute settlement clauses.
You're distorting the WTO process. The truth of the matter is, if we disregard the WTO findings, no one goes to prison, no one is arrested. There are
huge fines.
There are fines that we have contractually agreed to pay in the event that the Arbitration Council rules
and
a
I'm
certain
saying
way.
let's not sign any more of those contracts because we always get screwed. We've lost 50,000 factories, 60,000 factories since 2000. We're losing factories at the rate of 14 a day right now.
You don't care about how many factories you lose.
We have a $500 billion trade deficit. Our trade deficit went up after we signed the South Korea deal. Our trade deficit went up after we signed the NAFTA deal. Our trade deficit went up after we signed the Colombia deal. Every single one of these deals has increased our trade deficit, reduced our exports, increased our imports. We don't make anything in this country anymore.
Under this administration,
1/7 of all assets in this country are now owned by foreigners.
Under this administration, with the cheerleading from progressives, you guys have run manufacturing, what relic remains in this country, to the ground. Let's start with EPA. You're glad with every single regulation that they put forward that puts a chokehold. When you tell me you don't like
Let's talk about the car industry, okay, which President Obama saved. Let's talk about jobs that President Bush sent overseas and that, frankly, President Clinton sent overseas, okay? The shipping of manufacturing jobs in this country overseas did not start with President Obama, but it needs to end now. And last week's vote and Nancy Pelosi's shift on TPP was a major victory for progressives, and now we need to make sure that we continue to slow this process down and ultimately stop TPP in order to save American jobs.
Handing Chrysler over to foreigners, lock, stock, and barrel, that's what you guys are proud of? Divesting all of the owners who were shareholders in General Motors and giving that to the UAW, that's what you're proud of?
That's exactly what Mitt Romney wanted.
What you're doing, and it was wrong. And it was wrong.
It has worked.
Manufacturing has left in places where there's bad democratic policies. Let's talk about South Carolina. South Carolina,
it's left all over the United States.
South Carolina, where a Republican female minority governor just announced a brand new Volvo manufacturing facility. It's
great. So all the profits go to Sweden.
Republican policies are bringing manufacturing back.
Manufacturing.
And how much are those workers making at that facility?
Are
they making UAW wages?
$15 an hour.
They're making it double or triple minimum wage.
Can they
and
raise
they're
a
getting
family?
benefits that are valuable. And in fact, it's this idea that you progressives have that you can pick who the employers ought to be that's been destructive. What Volvo has figured out...
pick the rules of the game of trade and commerce.
What Volvo has figured out is that to follow the rules in Sweden that progressives have taken over are too onerous, and so let's come to America and do it. All that you're going to have happen is if we follow
Volvo
this
is not making cars for export here. They're making cars. They're not making cars for export here. Neither does Honda. Neither does Toyota.
Yes, they do.
No, they make cars for the domestic market. That's the whole point of manufacturing in the United States. Yeah, they're not making them here for export to Sweden. They make Volvos in Sweden. They're not going to stop making Volvos in Sweden.
Actually, they sell more outside of Europe.
Of course, Sweden's a little tiny country.
No. I said outside of Europe, outside of the EU. They sell more outside of the EU.
Well, each country has its own preferred. You know, in Germany, you see BMWs and Volkswagen.
This is an issue that I've been quite interested in. If they were to sell the margin that they sell, they couldn't profitably do so in Europe.
Let me just get this straight. You're suggesting that the loss of manufacturing jobs is not the result of 35 years of insane trade policies, that the loss of manufacturing jobs is because we're not letting the Cuyahoga River catch on fire, we're not killing Lake Erie because we're starting to enforce environmental regulations. Do I get that right?
Well, what I do know is that we haven't seen... What we haven't seen is a growth in manufacturing in all of the places that have been impacted by the wonderful EPA rules that you guys love.
Anywhere in the United States, and it's a consequence of
Clean Air
trade.
Act, the Clean Water Act.
More of tonight's Big Picture Rumble after the break.
I'm a fighter. I can take a punch. I live. I learn something every day. I strike when I need to strike.
Just like that.
I prepare. I've earned everything I have. If I fall, I get back up. I won't be underestimated. I'm Erin Aid, and I put the boom into boom bust.
Welcome back. Still with me, Brian Pruitt, TJ Helmstetter, and Horace Cooper. Let's get back to it. The FDA ruled on Tuesday that it no longer considers trans fats as generally recognized as safe, or GRAS, and gave the food industry 3 years to eliminate trans fats from America's food supply. That effort is estimated to cost $6 billion to industry to put into effect. But it's expected to save about $7 billion per year in health care and other costs, for a total of about $140 billion in savings over the next 20 years. More importantly, this regulation will save lives. The FDA estimates that banning artificial trans fats could prevent 20,000 heart attacks and 7,000 deaths from heart disease every year. It saves money, it saves lives. Can't we all agree this is a great government regulation?
One would hope. One would hope we could all agree on this, Tom.
This is the perfect example of the president continuing to lead from behind. Private companies have already started doing this in response to customer demand. And so now the president comes in through his regulatory regulation making authority and says, wow, private sector has already come up with a great idea. Let's now make everybody else do it.
Well,
There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, the president doesn't control the FDA. It's an independent agency. Okay. But secondly, this is an example of government taking about 30 years to catch up with science. Okay. We've known that trans fats kill people for 20 to 30 years now, and it's taken the government this long to say enough is enough.
It was Republican Bloomberg, though, who started this regulation. I mean, New York City banned trans fats in restaurants, and long before this.
I refer to him as,
that started industry saying, okay, we want to sell in New York City.
I refer to him as bully billionaire, not Republican Bloomberg.
He is a Republican.
Maybe.
But he was also a good public health mayor. He did great things on smoking and trans fats, tried to get soda out of schools. But the fact is, like you said, this will save 20,000 heart attacks a year, 7,000 lives a year. One would hope that we could all agree on this. The fact is, this is not about consumer choice. It's not like I can't go and buy my Twinkies and my Ho-Hos if I want to. It just means that that company needs to use palm oil instead of this partially hydrogenated.
Right. The fact of the matter is,
you minimize the cost, and you minimize who was targeted.
Trans fats are artificially created.
It doesn't matter whether they're artificially
created or not. You take fat, heat it up to 790 degrees, bubble hydrogen through it, and now you got trans fats. That's not something our bodies evolved to.
I don't care.
Respond to.
It's a free product. It's a product that people are freely should be allowed to pick if they want.
Poison.
If they would like to have them. You're for marijuana legalization, and that's poison. But that's
want to sell poison.
I think that the average consumer is not looking for partially hydrogenated chemicals, whatever it is.
Put both products.
They're looking for healthy, delicious food, and companies.
And that's a lie.
Companies have the ability to use products that don't kill people.
You know how I know that's a lie? If you put the products side by side and let people pick, you'd be upset at how many people would pick the one product over the other.
Not if they taste the same and one kills you and one doesn't.
And there's a reason for that, Horace, and that is that many people what these trans fats.
It's up to you.
No, it's not. It's not that. It's that these trans fats extend shelf life, and so they reduce the cost of the products. And so a lot of people who are low-income folks are eating these products that are made with trans fats and dying as a result of it.
Tom, here's the story that no one's talking about, and that is that this change was already happening, but what the president and the FDA did was pick a fight by trying to mandate it. So what we have is a problem that is already being solved, a problem that's already being solved, being turned into an artificial controversy by this administration.
The companies didn't start eliminating the trans fats because they just thought it was a good thing to do. They did it because they saw these regulations coming down the line. Cities like New York and other big cities like them had already started, and they understood that this was coming. So yes, some companies were smart enough to already start start to eliminating
There
trans
are
fats,
some
and now the rest have to catch up.
No, there are some consumers
want to poison
who want
themselves.
the other products that don't have these ingredients in them, and people were responding to that. And as Josh Earnest said, when they took credit for the private choice that the FDA does, that the president doesn't control, when he took credit for this, he said it was time for this to be mandated. But the problem isn't that. The problem is that you're targeting an industry and making them bear all of the costs while we claim to spread out the benefit.
An industry that has not paid any of the costs of all the heart attacks.
That's how you kill jobs. And that's what you do with EPA.
That's how you save lives.
That's
this industry has been killing people, and they're not paying for it.
That's why you have these.
We're not even asking them to pay for it. We're simply saying stop killing people.
Yes, you are. You're absolutely imposing. It's a $6 billion.
Speaking of killing people, the Vatican will release the first papal encyclical on climate change this week, and a leaked copy spells bad news for presidential candidates who happen to be Republican and Catholic. Take a look at Jeb Bush as Jeb Bush tries to separate personal religion, he's Catholic, and public leadership.
I hope I'm not going to get castigated for saying this by my priest back home, but I don't get economic policy from my bishops or my cardinals or from my pope, and I'd like to see what he says as it relates to climate change and how that connects to these broader, deeper issues before I pass judgment. But I think religion ought to be about making us better as people and less about things that end up getting into the political realm. So I'm a little skeptical about this.
Compare to that to what he said in 2009. As a public leader, Jeb Bush said, one's faith should guide you. In the United States, many people think you need to keep your faith, put it in a security box if you're an elected official. Put it in a safety deposit box until you finish your service as a public servant, and then you can go get it back. I never thought that was appropriate. So, but Jeb's not the only cafeteria Catholic who's running for the nomination. Rick Santorum, Bobby Jindal, Marco Rubio all deny climate change while claiming to be Catholic. So how long are these candidates going to be able to walk this tightrope between their pope and claiming to be good, God-fearing Americans?
I think it's interesting that, Jeb Bush cites his Catholic faith when he's saying who I can or can't marry or what women can do with their bodies.
Or Terry Schiavo.
Right. But, when it comes to climate change, well, we better not listen to the Pope because ExxonMobil gives me money and I need them to be happy.
Right. And climate change is killing people.
I'll make a trade with you, Tom. You embrace the Pope's policies on family, abortion, and gay marriage, and I'll embrace your crazy ideas and those of the Pope's on the environment. How's that? No, you won't make that trade because you want to be a cafeteria.
Well, are either of you Catholic?
I
grew up Catholic, and I think that this Pope is being very consistent in putting the needs of the poor first, which is what I was taught as a Catholic. And the fact is that poor people are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and it is up to the wealthy to stop it.
Poor people are disproportionately impacted by climate change regulation policies. They're overwhelmingly going to be the front line of those harmed by these policies. But the point is,
and rich people are the ones who are getting $5.3 trillion a year in subsidies. The oil industry worldwide.
I haven't heard from a pope yet who's in favor of the death penalty, and yet all of these Catholic elected leaders who happen to be Republican are all invariably in favor of the death penalty, and it has caused them no problem.
That's not entirely true.
Who does it cause a problem for?
The Pope is a moral leader, and it's very hard, I think, what some people are trying to do on the left is turn the Pope into sort of a policy wonk.
The first chapter of Genesis says we should be stewards of the earth.
Absolutely. Well, there's different ways
in that same chapter he created man and woman.
Right. So there's
the concept of marriage.
There's that particular part of Genesis has been been interpreted in different ways. I think we can all come to a consensus that what's called for is stewardship, but that is achieved in different ways. And I think what you're going to hear the Pope say is that we have to take care of the earth. I think it's incumbent on Republicans and Democrats alike to not only come up with solutions, but also not not blame America first. I think what happened when people...
blaming America? Isn't
Well,
that
I am. I'm blaming America and other industrialized countries
There you go.
because we are the nations, the wealthy nations of the world are the ones that are polluting the world and destroying it for the poorer countries of the world. Like, look at Indonesia, which is basically, you know, its citizens are going to be drowning because countries like the U.S. keep polluting.
Democrats hear that the Pope is going to issue an encyclical on climate change, and all they see are dollar signs. All they see are fines. All they see are more taxes on rich companies. That's all they see. They don't see the leader.
He's a Democrat.
Democrats.
Oh, well, I'm a Democrat, and what I see is saved
progressive.
lives and cleaner air. And the fact is that
bigger
ExxonMobil
fines,
should
more-
be ashamed of itself because it paid over $700,000 to a group putting out press releases attacking this Pope. And yes, there was someone in the Vatican who leaked this encyclical a few days early. So actually, we already know what it says. And we know that it will say that man has helped create climate change and that it's man's responsibility to end it.
Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, House Republicans proposed a budget this week that would eliminate funding for the Title X program. Title X is a program created by Richard Nixon to ensure that family planning providers could offer birth control, cancer screenings, STD testing, and reproductive health treatment to millions of low-income women. Nixon declared it at the time. He said, "It is my view that no American woman should be denied access to family planning assistance because of her economic condition." House Republicans tried to dismantle Title X, Title X, in 2011, but that proposal couldn't pass because Democrats still controlled the Senate. But with a Republican-controlled Senate, it's much more likely that this is going to make it to the Congress's final budget. So why do Republicans want to cut a women's health program that was created and championed by Republican President Richard Nixon? I mean, you're all in favor of Nixon's fast track. He invented that, too.
This problem will go away if Planned Parenthood and the other abortuary operators decide that they're no longer going to do that, and they'll just stick to STD testing, they'll stick to cervical screenings and the like, and then you won't have this problem.
No,
the problem is that we're funding abortion mills all across this country, and Americans, including non-Americans like the
you ever heard of the Hyde
Pope, don't
Amendment?
support them.
Okay, this funding has
Absolutely,
nothing
they
to do with
pretend.
abortion. In fact, this is incredibly hypocritical of Republicans to oppose this funding because actually what we know is that when women and girls are educated and when women and girls have access to contraception and sex education, that the rate of abortion goes down, not up. So if Republicans are serious about being quote-unquote pro-life, they will support increased funding for women's health, not decreased.
Brian, last word.
I think this is all about abortion absolutism. And I think there is a compromise to be had, but it does have everything to do with eliminating, absolutely eliminating funding in any way, even sort of getting around it indirect ways of funding, publicly funding abortion.
Is this about putting Planned Parenthood out of business because they're nonprofits so that a for-profit company can come in and replace them or something? I mean,
What's
I'm trying to think like a Republican.
What's wrong with sticking to cancer screening? What's wrong with mammograms? Planned Parenthood
That's the
has
vast majority of what they do.
That is not what Planned Parenthood does. They
Where's the
refer
graphic of it?
They refer you to other companies because they're so busy making space for the abortion mills.
This is what Planned. Look at the screen. Look at the screen right there, Horace. That's what Planned Parenthood. That's the breakdown of what they provide.
You look at the Library of Congress and the assessment that they did, and you see that that's not true.
Brian Pruitt, T.J. Helmstetter, Horace Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, if it's not the Iraq War, it's America's seniors. Either way, Jeb Bush keeps blundering over his brother's checkered legacy.